All right, everybody's favorite, punctuation rules. So as you guys probably know, punctuation is a huge part of both the SAT and the ACT. And just a plug from a journalism major here in life. So again, I would encourage you not just to learn these for the test, but to learn these rules for your writing. They are going to matter in college and beyond. Okay, so we're going to start off today with commas. Commas have rules, despite what some of you seem to think. You kind of drop them in like sprinkles on ice cream or completely leave them out. So we want to learn the rules of how to use them so it's no longer this mystery, okay? So if you guys turn to page 24 of your N.A.P. coursebook, we are going to go through some of these notes together and hopefully it will clear things up. So remember, if you can't use a rule to justify a comma, it isn't needed. A lot of questions on the test will actually put in extra commas, so don't over punctuate, right? Okay, one thing that I like to do, actually had a fourth grade teacher teach me this to break down sentences, and it's been wonderful, even throughout journalism school and both of my master's degrees. Always read the sentence out loud in your head to hear if a pause would be needed. What I mean by that is don't just be like, skim through it. Really read it where the pauses would be. So like over-exaggerate where that comma is, over-exaggerate that pause. If it's weird to pause in normal speech at that point and you can't prove it with a rule, it's probably not going to go there. Whereas if you pause, even if it's a longer pause, it'll still sound like where the comma should go. Maybe you wouldn't naturally pause that long while speaking, but it should still make sense, right? And we'll see that today. All right, so we've got some rules here in your course book, okay? The first rule is what we call the conjunctions rule, okay? So what we want to do here is we want to use commas to separate independent clauses, as we've already worked on in our building blocks of a sentence, when they are joined by any of these, what we call 7 coordinating conjunctions. You may have heard these as fanboys, for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. Okay, so basically what that means is if you have 2 independent clauses and that conjunction's kind of in the middle of them, he needs a comma before the conjunction. So look at my example. I wanted to walk the dog, but it was raining outside. So I wanted to walk the dog can stand by itself. So can it was raining outside. So we need that comma and a but. Okay, this one does show up a lot on the test. Okay, rule number 2 is introductory modifying phrases. So we do want to use commas after introductory clauses, phrases, or words that come before the main clause. And this is also part of modifier errors, which we'll get to in a later video, but very important. So you can see the example I used. Dancing cheek to cheek, comma, the couple performed a sultry tango for the judges. So who was dancing cheek to cheek? Well, the couple, obviously. So we separate that, what we call introductory modifier clause, dancing cheek to cheek, comma, and then who was doing or who the modifier clause refers to. Okay? Number 3, another big rule that shows up a lot is what we call our non-essential clause or a positive rule. Okay, we basically use a pair of commas in the middle of a sentence to set off clauses, phrases, and words that are not essential to the meaning. They essentially give us extra info, but if we put our fingers on those commas and ripped out that clause, it would still be a sentence, okay? So we basically use 1 comma before to indicate the beginning of the pause, and 1 at the end to end the pause, right? So they kind of flank or surround the appositive phrase. So let's use an example here. Much of her reading, comma, which included Faulkner, Cather, and Hemingway, comma, was for her American Modernism class. So this one's actually interesting because we have our next rule previewed here too, which is our lists, which a lot of people are familiar with. So we're listing 3 authors, but you can see the comma before which and the comma after Hemingway, that's our extra info. So if you ripped that out of the sentence, much of her reading was for her American Modernism class, that still makes sense. That appositive clause is just giving you extra info. He needs to be flanked with commas. Okay, number 4 is lists. So most people are familiar with this rule. We separate 3 or more words, phrases, or clauses in a series. The tests do use the Oxford comma. What is the Oxford comma? Well, that's that comma that's right before the last item. So in journalism school, for instance, journalism does not tend to use the Oxford comma. The SAT and the ACT do. So you can see here, Jordan likes chocolate cake, comma, ice cream, comma, that's your Oxford comma, and sweet tarts. He has a real sweet tooth. So you can just see when we have that list, we use a comma, okay? 5 is adjectives. So this one has been showing up more. Adjectives can be a little tricky because it depends on which adjective is modifying what word in the sentence. But essentially, we do use commas to separate 2 or more coordinate adjectives to describe the same noun. Okay, so we don't want to add extra commas between the final adjective and the noun. Like you wouldn't say the bright, comma, shiny, comma, horse. That's a little strange. So it would be the bright, comma, shiny horse. Okay, so again, the example I used here, because clearly I've been in a horse mood, the horse's coat was sleek, comma, shiny, comma, and well-conditioned. So also sort of combines the previous rule as well. A lot of people ask about this one because not all adjectives refer to the same word. So for instance, if you said I was wearing a blue cotton shirt, right? The blue is modifying cotton, the cotton is modifying shirt, so I don't need any commas. It would not be blue, comma, cotton shirt. I'm wearing a blue cotton shirt. Okay? Then we have our connecting independent and dependent clauses rule. Okay, we've gone over this in our building blocks of a sentence. So an independent clause can stand by itself as a full sentence, a dependent clause cannot. But the good news is that while we can't use a comma to connect two independent clauses, we did that in our run-ons and comma splices lesson, we can use them to connect what I call a DC and an IC, or an IC and a DC, so a dependent clause and an independent clause. So the first example I gave you is a DC plus an IC by taking off every Friday, kind of like our modifier. Natalie got her coworkers to resent her. Here's the other way around. Natalie took off every Friday, annoying her coworkers who had to pick up the slack. So it can go either way. A comma is acceptable to connect those two types of clauses. Okay, geography and dates. Again, a lot of you guys are familiar with the very basic, comma after a date, but a lot of people aren't familiar with the comma after the year when it's mid-sentence. So usually you end the sentence with the date, you put a period, but here I was born in Somerville, comma, New Jersey, comma, so we have to have a comma after the city and the state on January 20th, comma, 1985, comma, so a comma after the date and the year, and then we continued the sentence. So make sure that you are paying attention to that if the city and state or the dates are mid-sentence. And then rule number 8 is quotations. So we use a comma to introduce a quote. You probably know that from your writing in school. He glared at her and said, comma, and then here's his quote. Fine, you can take the Ferrari. I'll suffer with the Maserati. Must be nice. Okay, so those are your rules. No one expects you to know them after one session, but I highly recommend, again, writing your own examples, really studying these, maybe making flashcards, make up a song about it. Love to hear it. Okay, here's some don'ts. We just went over the do's. Let's go over some don'ts. So no comma abuse. Some of you have abusive relationships with commas, okay? So we don't use a comma to separate the subject from the verb. That's a very strange one I see a lot in writing. So here are some incorrect examples. An 18-year-old in California is now considered an adult. That should not sound like natural speech to you. An 18-year-old in California is now considered an adult. You wouldn't pause. The most important attribute of a ball player is quick reflex actions. Nope. Okay? So don't put a comma between two verbs or verb phrases in a compound predicate. Okay, that may sound foreign to you, but let's look at the examples. We laid out our music and snacks and began to study. So do you see how we've got two verbs? We have a we laid out our music and began to study. Nope, we did this and we did this. Okay? I turned the corner and ran smack into a patrol car. Nope, I turned the corner and ran smack into a patrol car. It's just one sentence. No commas, all right? Last rule of a don't. Don't put a comma between the two nouns, noun phrases, or noun clauses in a compound subject or compound object. So we did compounds in another video, right? Compounds have that and in them. So you can see the music teacher from your high school and the football coach from mine are married, right? We wouldn't pause there, okay? It's the music teacher from your high school and the football coach from mine are married. We don't need any pauses there, okay? Jeff told me that the job was still available and that the manager wanted to interview me, right? We wouldn't pause there. Again, it's a continuous thing. Jeff told me the job was still available and the manager wanted to interview me. It's the same event. It's a compound event, so we wouldn't put commas there, okay? So hopefully that helps a little bit. Oh, we have one more. Okay, so we don't want to put a comma after the main clause when a dependent clause follows it. So again, may sound a little foreign, but look at the example. Okay, the cat scratched at the door while I was eating. Okay, so you can see when we use those dependent clause words to make it subordinate, which in this case is the while. Again, much like the other example, it's not separate. It's the same event. The cat scratched at the door while I was eating, right? So we wouldn't do that. Like any good rule, there's an exception. Basically, they're trying to say here that this is an extreme contrast. So she was still quite upset, comma, although she had won the Oscar. So they're trying to show there that there actually is a contrast in events. I wouldn't worry too much about that one. I just like to be complete and I don't want to lead you guys astray. But again, I highly, highly recommend studying these rules. I think they're going to be super, super important. Okay. You can also see on the bottom of page 26, I put an online writing lab comma exercise. This is from Purdue OWL, which is a very good grammar website if you ever need help. And basically you can see from the directions, you want to add in the commas and then actually write in the appropriate number of the comma rule, because I'm annoying like that. And I don't want you just to do these activities. I want you to engage with them and really, really try. Okay, so you can see that I do have an answer key below. So these are really good for you to try by yourself first. Of course, I do believe in using answer keys to study from. But again, it's not so much how many you got right or wrong. It's to see where you need work. And if the same, rule or two rules keep coming up, it's probably a good way or a good indicator that you should still be studying those. So that is kind of our quick and dirty session on commas. I hope that helped a little bit. Make sure you jot down any questions to ask a tutor or an English teacher. And of course, use all those resources on the No Anxiety Prep portal. And happy commaing.